Hi, this is Greg with Zenatta Consulting. In this video, I'm going to talk about using the Zoho Flow Builder. This comes from our June 2023 webinar on Zoho Flow. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below or go to club.zenatta.com and you can join our forums there. If you find this video useful, please consider liking and subscribing here on YouTube, and let's jump into the tutorial. So to create a flow, I'm going to come up here to create and create flow. We'll give it a name. This is going to be our new form entry flow. I'll keep it inside of my CRM flows here. We'll give it a description. When an entry is recorded, check if the person already exists as a lead in Zoho CRM. Jordan already went over the various triggers, webhooks for anything that doesn't already have a pre-built integration. You can also have a schedule if you know something is going to run on a regular basis. In this case, this is going to be an app trigger. So we're going to come here to the app. We'll search for the app in question. This will be Zoho Forms. So I'll just type in form, find it down here, hit next. Then I choose which trigger I'm going to be using. You can only select one trigger for any one particular flow. So if you have something that's going to possibly have a few different things that might trigger it, you'll have to just create a different flow for each of those. But flows can very easily just be copied and duplicated. So not that big of an issue. We'll click on Enter Submitted New Version here, hit Next. Then here I select what connection I'm using. My connection to forms already exists. If I didn't have a connection already, so if I'm doing this for the first time, then I can click on New and set up what my connection is. So my Zoho Forms. Then I can choose whether I want just all of the available triggers and actions to be authorized, or if I only want to authorize specific triggers and actions. In this case, there's really only the one to worry about, so I'll just leave it at all. You would click authorize, then there will be a pop-up window that I wonder if I can copy and paste as a tab in here so that you can see. Yeah, there we go. Then it'll just ask you if you are willing to authorize this. You'll click accept. Now I can use it to access the forms in my organization. So we'll just go ahead and grab this form called test form. Here I can give my variable a specific name. Trigger is usually probably just fine. So I'm going to leave that there. You can also add additional filter criteria. So if I only wanted certain forms to come through here to help just prevent flows that don't need to run in the first place, but we'll go ahead and just leave that as bringing over everything. All right, so here we are on the Flow Builder. Here you have a couple of different pages. One is this summary page. This is very similar to the things that we saw on the dashboard, where I can see recent executions, as well as the just description information. So if I need to change the flow's name or description, I would do that here, as well as seeing any connections that are involved in this particular flow to change its name or test to make sure that it is still working. Then we also have the history page here, which will have a list of any executions that this flow has had. We'll go into that a little bit more in depth later. But now to jump into adding our action blocks. So Zoho Flow is a drag and drop editor where you can find a particular action that you're going to use and then drag it onto the page here and connect the different steps together using these little arrows. So in the case of the form here, when a new entry is submitted, I want to check the CRM if a lead exists. Over here on the left-hand side, we have the list of all the apps. Obviously, there are a lot here, and to try to scroll through all these is maddening. So I would just always use the search functionality. I know that I'm looking for a Zoho CRM trigger. I'm just going to type in Zoho CRM. And there it is. So now I can click on this little drop down, and here's all the actions that I can do to the Zoho CRM. I can fetch things, I can create things, delete, update, all sorts of options. In this case, I want to try to fetch a lead. So I'm going to drag it over, and it gives me a little spot to drop it where it'll automatically connect it. So I'm going to drop fetch lead in right there. And now it automatically pops up the configuration screen. So here, similar to what we had to do to connect Zoho Forms, if you haven't connected anything to the CRM yet, you would authorize that connection here. Then you can rename the variable. In this case, fetch lead 1 is fine because that's what we're doing. In this case, I need to either include an email or a unique ID. Since this is coming from Zoho Forms, we don't have the Zoho ID, so we're going to use the email. Over here on the right-hand side, I have the different steps that have already been completed in my flow up until this point to use as variables in the subsequent steps. So here I'm going to click on this entry submitted new version. And here I have all the fields that are on that Zoho form. And so what's really nice is about these pre-built integrations is that it already knows what fields exist on that form. So it pulls all of these in automatically, as opposed to, say, a webhook where you'll actually have to start sending some test data into that webhook in order to see those variables pop up here. But here I'll just have to click on, I'll put my cursor inside of the email box here, and then I will click on the email variable, and it automatically populates it with the merge tag that will have that data assigned to it. So now that I have my trigger.email in here, I can click on done. And so now that will be fetching my lead. So now I need to make a decision. Did I find a lead or did I not find a lead? And then I need to decide what I'm going to do in each situation. So since I have to make a decision, I'm going to come over here to logic. And here we have some flow control action blocks that we can drag over. There's set variable, decision, and delay. A set variable is something that allows you to do just that. You can pull something over and say that a variable that I know I'm going to use at other spots in the flow, and just to make it a little bit easier to reference, I can put something in there. So like we'll have this variable be called CRM lead ID, and the value is going to be the ID from that lead record that we are attempting to grab. If you ever have any APIs or things that you're working with that you need to give a little bit of time between API calls, or if, say, I want to trigger this maybe like, I don't know, a minute after the form entry actually comes in, give other systems that it might be integrated with time to update its records or its searching functionality, you can add in a delay here. And the delay is a very interesting tool because you can either delay until a specific date or you can type in a duration. They have some usage examples here. So you actually type it in layman's terms of how long you want the delay to run for. And they have, I believe it's Zia is on the back end interpreting these inputs as durations. So you either write in 2 minutes, 2 hours, 5 days, 17 seconds, whatever it is, then that would delay it for that amount of time. But we won't actually use a delay in this instance. So to remove a particular block, I'm just going to come down here to the little trash can icon and delete it. But what I am going to bring in is a decision box. This is something that you're going to use a lot in Zoho Flow because this is where all of your logic gets defined. So for our condition here, I want to know, is there an actual lead that was found? I'm going to scroll down to, I have my set variable of CRM lead ID that I use from the set variable from the fetch lead action. And I'm going to have this evaluate whether or not it is or is not null. In this case, I'm going to do is not null, meaning that there was a lead found. And I'm going to hit done. And now I want to rename this condition so that it's a little bit clearer when I'm working on what pathway this is referring to. So this is CRM lead found, right? Because I'm testing that the lead ID is not null. So this decision box is about finding out, is the lead found? Now, I could also add another condition here so to turn it kind of into an if, else statement. So I could also come down here and define CRM lead ID. Well, what if it is null? And then write down here, CRM lead not found. And that would be the other path. Then if none of these conditions are met, it would go to the default here and it passes through this bottom pathway here. Now, this default should never be hit because either the ID is there or it's not there. So also by that same token, I didn't necessarily have to add this, but I do tend to like to add these kinds of things because it's just easier for me to read that, is it found? Is it not found? So now we'll say if our CRM lead is not found, if this is adding to the contacts module, then we want to create a CRM contact. So I'm going to come back over here to apps and I'll search for Zoho CRM again. And let's go to find create or update contact. So now you can see, now that I've dragged this over, there's a lot of different spots here that it's offering me to be able to drop it. We'll talk about the on error thing a little bit later, but I can drop it on the path where the CRM lead is found or where it's not found or with the default condition. In this case, I want to drop it on the not found. But let's say I accidentally drop it in the wrong spot. Oh no. Let me hit the X button here. Oh no, I don't want this connected to the CRM lead being found. This should only happen if the CRM lead wasn't found. So instead, I can always hover over one of these little connecting arrows. There's a little scissors icon here that you can click to remove or detach the wire, as they refer to it. So I'll delete that wire. Then to connect this back onto the path, I'm going to come to this little bubble next to the condition of CRM lead not found. And then I'm going to click, and then I have this little arrow while I'm dragging, and I'm just going to drag it over this action block, and now it's connected. Now I can move this thing around and that arrow will stay connected. I know that it is now on that flow path. Then I can come back in here and continue adding elements here. So here I can add things like the last name. So I'll go to the fetch lead entry here, and I could have last name. I could also search for variables here. So if I search for last name, then I only get variables. So I can either pull it from the lead record or the form entry record. In this case, the lead wasn't found, so there is nothing there. So we want to use it from the form, not from the CRM lead record. So I'm going to click on last name from the form, put it in there, and then we'll add in let's at least add in the first name and the email. First name, and then email. Great. And so now here we already have a basic flow done. If my form gets filled in and there isn't already a lead in the system, then my contact is going to be created. Now, at the moment, if we do find a lead, then just nothing is going to happen. Just a lead is going to be left alone in there. So let's say that we wanted to convert that lead into a contact. There is a specific CRM action for that. So I can drag that over to if the lead is found, and then the lead ID, we'll grab that from you can grab it either from the set variable or from the fetch lead. I'll grab it from the set variable we did, CRM lead ID. Actually, that's all we really have to do in this case. You can specify additional criteria here if you want to, like if you wanted to create a deal for this person, but very simply, we can just leave it as convert the lead to a contact. As much as I would like to assume that nothing is ever going to go wrong with this flow, there of course is a possibility that there is going to be an error. Say when it's creating the contact, if there's some data missing, or if I'm converting the lead, maybe the connection gets broken at some point. That's what these little red bubbles on these action blocks are for. These are a pathway that the flow will take if an error is hit during the execution process. And one of the simplest things that you can do is just send yourself a notification to let yourself know that something went wrong. All right, so I'm going to pull in a send email, and then you see now I have these blocks for on error. So I'm going to drop one here for the on error of creating a contact. Select where I want the email to come from, who to send it to. So I can send it to myself, greg@zenatta.com. And we can have the subject, there was an error processing a form entry for, And then I can actually include variables inside the subject line, which would be really nice so that I don't accidentally, so that you don't end up creating like one thread with everything. You can actually see those different entries separated. So I can include, say, the email for the person that is filling this out. And then I can have an additional message here. There was an error processing the following form entry in the new form entry flow. And then I could include some of the different pieces of data here so that I'll have something to look at and review. Submitted time, just something to help notify me that something went wrong. I need to go in and take a look at the flow, see what happened, and troubleshoot. The other nice thing about Zoho Flow is that you can merge wires to go to a single action block. If I want to just send the same email, whether or not it's this that fails or this that fails, I can just grab the little on error block and drag the wire over to this send email. So now both of these error pathways are connected to the same send mail. So I don't have to have the same, I don't have to just recreate that send mail task. Then that is, that's pretty much it. There is the ability to create custom functions, but Jordan is going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. Finally, before I throw it over to him, I'm just going to mention that on the history tab is where you'll be able to see any recent executions, or actually just any and all executions. And the nice thing is you have some status filters. So if you want to just see any flows that failed, you can filter those by those that failed with an error branch or without an error branch. And then also a date filter. One tip or trick, don't mean to step on Jordan's toes, who's going to talk about tips and tricks, but sometimes with the date today field, depending on this always seems to go off of, I believe, India's time zone. So if you use the date of today, it might not actually be today. So if you want to look at today's flows, you might need to actually just go and click on the particular date to actually see those. Obviously, our flow doesn't have any executions here. So I'm now going to go to a Zoho help doc and show you what the list would look like. So specifically, I'm looking at the help doc here for about rerunning failed executions. So this is what a task history list would look like. In this case, these are all failed executions. Obviously, these had succeeded, then you'd have a nice little green completed here under the status. But if you do have any flows that have failed, you can check the little box next to them on the list. And then there's a box up at the top left that will allow you to rerun those flows. And there's two options that appear. There's resume and restart. Resume means that, so let's say my flow had 4 steps on it and it successfully completed steps 1 and 2, but it failed on step number 3. Choosing the resume option for rerunning would not rerun steps 1 and 2. It would just try to rerun starting at step number 3 using the old data from steps 1 and 2, and then attempt to successfully rerun it. So this would be for if, say, a connection was broken and there's nothing wrong with the data leading up to that point. There's just a problem at that one particular step. If you, however, end up with bad data in previous steps going into step number 3, and that's what's causing it to fail, then you'll want to use the restart option, which reruns the entire flow as if it's happening for the first time right then and there when you're clicking it. And if there is a successful run, then the history log will update to show that it's successfully completed, or it will continue to remain in a failed state. Now, something going back to something that I discussed at the beginning with task usage, something that you do not have to worry about is that failed reruns of flows do not count against your task usage limits. It's only a successful completion of an action that uses those task credits. And to speak to those task credits a little bit more, task credit is used every time one of these action blocks executes. So anything that is making some kind of communication directly with an outside app uses a credit. My trigger does not use a credit, so I don't use a credit just for receiving a new form entry, but I do use 1 credit for fetching the lead, and then I would use a credit for either converting the lead to a contact or creating or updating an existing contact. And then finally, I would also be using 1 task credit for sending out an email. So in this case, every time this flow runs, I'm going to use either 2 or 3 credits depending on the outcome of the flow. So that's just something to keep in mind, that if you can write your flows, if you know that you're going to be dealing with a high volume, try to write your flows efficiently so that you're not using a whole lot of extra steps, but also just bear that in mind that every action block will increase the overall task usage of that particular flow. All right, that's enough jibber jabber from me.